His Excellency Dr. Abdullah, the CEO of Afghanistan, Her Excellency the First Lady, Ministers Hakimi and Atmal, Ambassador Yamamoto, ladies and gentlemen, ambassadors, ministers, distinguished guests, distinguished colleagues, friends, fellow citizens. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to Kabul for today's senior official meetings. Our country and our people are honored by your presence. Today's meeting is part of a longer conversation about how the world community is partnering with the people of Afghanistan to build a better future. We acknowledge your partnership, and we are grateful that so many of you found the time to join us today for discussion. Thank you for your courage. Let us begin. In London, we presented the Self-Reliance Roadmap, which laid out how Afghanistan would build the foundations for a stable, sustainable country through a long-term process of reform and institution building. 1 year ago, we used the Brussels Ministerial Forum to turn the self-reliance approach into an operational program. It uses fiscal policy to set realistic priorities, build the country's revenue base, and turn plans for inclusive growth into a series of policy reforms and programs that bring development to the daily lives of our long-suffering people. Today, we're more than halfway through our administration. Now is the time to begin the reckoning of what has been achieved and what challenges must be overcome. Let us begin this stock-taking with a look back at where we started just 3 years ago. The National Unity Government took office in the midst of not one, but of 3 crises, each of which was a major challenge to our nation's survival. First, with the foresight of the international community's pending withdrawal, Taliban groups and its affiliates launched an unprecedented and bloody attack on our government and people. Let us not forget that thousands of innocent Afghans, children, men and women, lost their lives through attacks on civilian facilities such as schools, mosques, villages, and town centers. I and Dr. Abdullah spent too much of our first year holding babies, bodies of maimed children, in hospitals covered with burns from bombs that had been deliberately aimed at ordinary villages, at football fields, at soccer fields, at volleyball fields. The assault continues. This was the year when Taliban and their backers thought they would finally seize territory and make a base. They failed in achieving any of their strategic objectives. Not one provincial center has fallen. Their cruel, indiscriminate attacks on civilians, which violate all of civilization's treaties and conventions about human rights, have achieved nothing except to steal our people's resolve to resist. The valor displayed and the sacrifice endured by our defense and security forces is an expression of our deep-rooted patriotism and our Islamic belief in the justice of our cause. We are confident that terror and violence can be rolled back and beaten. It will neither be easy nor quick, but it will most definitely happen. The economic collapse that followed withdrawal may not have been as bloody as the terrorist assault on civilians, but it had human consequences that were nearly as grave. When growth collapses from 10% to minus 2%, the result is not just a red-colored bar graph in someone's annual budget report. It means thousands of families going hungry. It means villagers who tell us that they look forward to the season when they can eat once a day instead of once every other day. It means female-headed households sinking deeper into poverty. It means young men and women seeking economic refuge, becoming prey to unscrupulous human and drug traffickers. And we had a political transition. Many in London in November 2014 doubted that the national unity government would survive. And yet today, Dr. Abdullah and myself are here speaking in a united voice on how to secure the future of Afghanistan for generations to come. Making sure that the presidential election of 2019 meets the highest international standards and that the parliamentary and district council elections of 2018 provide the foundation for integrity and transparency is among our top priorities. Having paid a high price for disorderly and violent succession of high office through our history, we are dedicated to ensuring that orderly constitutional succession to high office is our legacy to the future. Yesterday, you heard from the First Lady and other Afghan women leaders. You also interacted with Dr. Qayyumi, our distinguished international leader on education and infrastructure, and a number of ministers and deputy ministers on drivers of inclusive growth and our programs and projects for infrastructure. The 2 hours of listening to our women in conversation was a singular pleasure, for it demonstrates the remark of our German colleague that Afghan women now own the discourse and the practice of empowerment. I hope that the other 2 sessions were equally productive. Leadership and management in Afghanistan is undergoing a generational change, and I'm proud to be a catalyst in passing the torch into the capable hands of the generation of 1990s, and hopeful that they leave their mark in our history as the great generation that succeeded in overcoming conflict, criminality, and corruption through commitment, compassion, and courage. I urge my colleagues to hone in their listening skills to distinguish between noise and emerging patterns, and to appreciate the wisdom of our citizens expecting civil servants to be their public servants. Throughout today, you will hear from other ministers, civil society, and private sector on the ways we have tackled Afghanistan's developmental challenges, not all of which have been as visible as needed. We approach these problems by way of introduction to this senior officials meeting. First and most importantly, starting in London, we took full ownership of our problems. Securing the country, investing in rule of law, stopping corruption, building up revenue, these are our problems, not yours. Let me repeat, these are our problems, we need to solve them. Take security. Between 2002 and 2013, there were over 4,000 international troops killed, and we paid them tribute. And 1,000 more wounded. Since 2014, there have been less than 100 international fatalities. The blood being shed is Afghan. And I make no pretense of hiding the fact that the numbers of dead and wounded on both sides of the battlefield are truly horrific. Taliban groups and their supporters, however, are responsible for this bloodbath, as they rejected the offer of the government of national unity for peace through political dialogue. But when war is imposed on us, we Afghans are not shying away from the defense of our country. And I don't think that a single general from the international community will fail to acknowledge not just the bravery of our soldiers and officers and NCOs, but of our government's commitment to improving the quality of leadership and the ability of our security forces to defend the nation. As Commander-in-Chief, I've been privileged to visit 6 of our Army Corps recently, listening and speaking to all ranks, and am proud to salute their heroism and increasing professionalism. I also acknowledge commitment and the strategic patience of our people, particularly the families of civilian victims of violence, for their dignity and dedication. We took ownership of our responsibilities to be a democratic, peaceful neighbor to the countries of our region. Afghanistan does not and never will be a sponsor of international terrorism or rely on malign non-state actors as an instrument of policy. We build bridges to our neighbors. No country in our region has tried harder to sign treaties, develop shared resources, free up trade, and promote the kind of dialogue that will turn peaceful cooperation into greater welfare and security throughout the region. And we are proud that our efforts on connectivity are paying off. Afghanistan will become a hub for regional trade and transit. Taking our partnership seriously, we work to deepen and broaden them. And Warsaw and Brussels are illustrations of this. We took ownership of our responsibility to stop corruption. With your help, we established the Anti-Corruption Justice Center, which to date has not only tried more than 300 cases of higher-level corruption, but for the first time in Afghan history, we've sentenced in jail senior security and civilian officials who've abused the public's trust. I salute the Attorney General, the Chief Justice, and all our officials who have displayed remarkable courage and conviction to secure these gains for our people and for our citizens. To build on that first foundation of an anti-corruption program, we recently endorsed a highly pragmatic, but we believe very realistic, national anti-corruption strategy that is already being put into practice. My colleagues and I look forward to a rich and candid discussion on how to fight corruption. We are proud that our government stands behind the freedom of the press to report on corruption, on the rights of activists to demonstrate against it, and for the independence of the judiciary to prosecute and convict. Hearing about corruption pains every one of us. Our people hate it. Our young people, our women, and especially our poor, the three numerical majorities of our people hate it. I hate it. I want to assure not just you and the international community, but my colleagues and friends from the Afghan civil society and private sector, that you have our firm, unwavering backing for continued advocacy and partnership in bringing this scourge to an end. And we took ownership of our responsibility to the poor, the women, and the youth. Helping the poor is not just our constitutional and political obligation. It is the bedrock of our religion and our culture. That Afghan children go hungry, that widows of our martyrs cannot send their children to school, that farmers who worked all year then see their fruit rot in the fields. This is not your problem as donors to Afghanistan's development. It is our failing, and it will not continue. It will not be permitted to continue. In Brussels a year ago, we announced that we would soon be launching the Citizens' Charter, a national priority program to provide basic services to villages and townships across the country. Today, the Citizens' Charter is operating in 2,200 urban and rural communities across the entire country, and will not only reach its first-year target of 2,500 community council, but is doing so well that we are already accelerating its scaling up. In Brussels, EU Foreign Minister Mogherini, the First Lady, and I launched the National Program for Women's Economic Empowerment. As of today, 67,000 poor women have been supported in agricultural activities. 35,000 women have received training and support in how to raise and market livestock. And our Ministry of Finance has already authorized the hiring of 3,000 women, contract teachers, so that Afghanistan's newly returned citizens can be assured that their daughters will be both literate and numerate. If investing in a girl's education changes 5 generations, ignoring the poverty of female-headed households condemns several generations to abuse, exclusion, neglect, and violence. The economic empowerment of women is crucial. There are biographies of 60 women, addicted husbands, widows, orphans, who have changed their lives through becoming model farmers. In taking a small step, each one of them collectively, they've taken a giant step. What's the outcome? Children who eat and are not stunted. Girls who attend school and their stationery is paid for by their mothers. Access to protein that was denied to many other households. In learning from small, we need to learn to scale up and address the larger problems. And here I cannot resist a side acknowledgement to the prowess of our amazing girls robotic team that recently visited the United States, who by themselves have been a better indicator of our success in changing this generation of girls' expectations than an entire sack of the statistics could have done. I can assure you that there are hundreds more such girls. And there will be thousands and then millions. If taking ownership of our problems was the first precondition for action, the second step was to recognize that we needed to build better systems and not just better projects. Our London paper promised to deliver reforms in 7 key areas. First, we said that we would tackle the underlying drivers of corruption. You have with you our newly issued National Anti-Corruption Strategy. The strategy rests on 5 pillars: national leadership, security sector reform with a particular emphasis on reforming the police, improving the quality of civil service recruitment, effectively prosecuting corrupt people, and increasing our ability to oversight how money is transferred and spent. And while anti-corruption will always be a whole-of-government effort, to be realistic, we give first priority to aggressively pursuing corruption in our 9 top security, revenue, and expenditure ministries, with particular roles for private sector and civil society engagement. These are monitoring and advocacy roles. However, confident we are in this strategy, one major area where we have not yet had the space to act as decisively as needed is in controlling the linkage between the narcotics trade and corruption in government. We have not forgotten or ignored this issue. However, we first need to provide the reinforcement that our security, judicial, and anti-money laundering institution will need for those efforts to succeed. And I'm very pleased to share that Ministry of Finance's central bank have been removed from the gray list on financial flows, and now we are fully accredited member for banking transactions with the international banking community. We discovered just how deep-rooted the corruption drought had spread throughout our body politic when our civil society partners and we began doing serious investigations and reviews. I would like to say a special thank you to our friends in MEC, SAGAR, and civil society who are rigorously turning over the rocks to find the corruption beneath. You will be hearing in today's session the most recent finding that the education program that so many of you have so generously supported over the years nevertheless proved to be riddled with politically inspired corruption. It takes a special form of perversion to steal the education from a child. And you can rest assured that there will be a thorough response that includes criminal prosecutions at the very highest level and a total overhaul of that ministry. Second, we promise to provide better governance. Electoral reforms are underway. We are keeping our commitment to holding parliamentary elections on July 7, 2018. We've also proposed accelerating the deployment of biometric voting registration machinery to ensure that voting in the 2019 presidential election is as transparent and free of fraud as possible. Dr. Abdullah and I are committed to hearing the views of civil society and the Afghan political class on making sure that the Independent Election Commission is responsive. They are independent, but they must be supported, and we call on international community and civil society to have observers in support. Beyond elections, we're strengthening governance in ways that reach the lives of ordinary Afghans. Over 30% of our judges and prosecutors have been changed. Every single appellate judge in 34 provinces of Afghanistan has been changed. We spend more than $1 million from our own budget to hasten the retirement of superannuated prosecutors with a new generation of certified legal reformers. And with the impending launch of both a new system of land courts and the subnational governance strategy will bring a functioning justice sector to the provinces and districts where the majority of Afghans live. And rest assured, whenever government land is involved or government property is involved, the deed will be issued both in the name of men and women. Third, we promise to put the government on the pathway towards fiscal sustainability. By no means would we say that this job is done, but let me pay special tribute to Minister Hakimi and his colleagues for making immense progress. We have been disciplined partners for the IMF. You will hear from our finance ministry that we have exceeded every one of our revenue targets. We continue to put our fiscal house in order after 14 years of wastage and lost opportunity. And I'm pleased to invite you to pay special attention to the reforms being put in place to clean up customs and deliver a budget that would be truly predictable and outcome-oriented. Managing expenditure within constraints is the other part of fiscal sustainability. This will be the first year that the budget we will be sending to Parliament is one reflecting the fiscal realities of our country. Fourth, we committed to reforming our approach to development planning. The system of development councils and national priority programs that we proposed in Brussels is up and running. Yesterday, a question was raised as to how we coordinate, how we solve the problem of coordination between ministries, the councils, Madam Pampaloni, or the web. Vis-a-vis corruption, every report that makes SIGAR or any other or civil society organization comes to the High Council for Justice and Good Governance, Economic Council, series of others are there to make sure that across ministry prioritization and coordination takes place. National programs for infrastructure, urban development, energy self-sufficiency through public-private partnership, and a distributed program for electricity generation, transmission, and consumer industrial use. And development services for the poor are already operational. 2018 launches are planned for national programs in subnational governance, agribusiness development, and educational reform. Fifth, we promise to unleash the power of the private sector to create jobs and drive growth. While we acknowledge the cost that conflict places on our already challenging investment climate, we are indeed making progress. We asked our private sector leaders to define the priority obstacles to private sector development. Of their 11 top constraints, we have reformed or removed 8, with actions underway to address the remaining 3. Better business licensing has been advanced, punitive tax penalties were abolished, public-private partner legislation developed, and we are currently looking at innovations such as targeted tax holidays, investment promotion boards, and a high-level reporting mechanism so that demands for bribes from investors get quickly escalated and resolved. But we are not satisfied. Afghanistan cannot continue growing in single-digit figures if we ever hope to escape poverty and bring stability to our country. We must speed up reform. We have built the machinery for investing in growth, but we need to ruthlessly cut out waste and obstructionism. Too many private interests are blocking the public good, and they must not be permitted to do so. Corruption and red tape are enemies as potent as anything that the Taliban and terrorist groups can field against us. For this reason, we will be accelerating our private sector reform program, simplifying pro-investment regulations, in encouraging international partners to bring in their expertise in capital, to develop our resources and create jobs for our people. Our commitment to private sector development is not in doubt, nor is our potential. Afghanistan is tremendous mineral and natural resources, but to get them from deep underground to those places where they create jobs and support national growth will require commitment to private sector reform that I'm here to give you on behalf of the Government of National Unity today. But for us to create a favorable, predictable, and well-managed investment climate, we're going to need a lot of help to build skills needed to prepare viable, competitive tenders, to manage corruption-free licensing, to manage bids and contracts with full professional expertise and institutional ability, and to arbitrate disputes fairly and legally. We've been frightened by the curse of plenty, and we do not want to fall prey to wasting our natural resources for the sake of a small minority and sacrifice the majority of our people. This is a long way to go, but we now have credible reform roadmaps in ministries like mines and petroleum, which in the past resisted a change to competitive markets rather than government controls. We will need your best ideas for what will bring inclusive growth to our country, and we look forward to a lively discussion today and in the months ahead. Sixth, we said that we would ensure citizens' development rights. I've already referred to rapid startup of the Citizen Charter, the National Program for Economic Empowerment of Women, and our work to secure poor people's land rights from land grabbing and dispossession by the powerful. Clean water, basic health, education, citizens' access to energy, rising farm productivity, access to jobs. These themes will remain front and center throughout our development strategy and plans for investment. But today, I want to single out a development event that hasn't happened. In 2015, the first of what became more than 1 million refugees from Pakistan and Iran joined another million already living in camps for the internally displaced. With all of the other challenges that our country faces, this could easily have become another international crisis. Dr. Abdullah ably led our response. Instead, Afghanistan welcomed its new citizens home with open arms. Our national unity government came together with our international partners to provide a comprehensive whole-of-community policy framework to foster integration and prevent conflict, as such large numbers of people arrived to find shelter in already poor settlements. Our government did not wait for donor support, but instead immediately hired and deployed 3,000 women teachers so that the young girls of the returnees would face as few barriers as they enrolled in schools in their new homes. Regulations that restricted their mobility and access to services, such as health or education, were either modified or abolished. Winterization programs are well advanced. Planning for programs to reduce the time that returnees spend in camps and instead become economically vibrant members of host communities are already underway and will be expanded. Lastly, we promised to reinvent our approach to development partnership. I've already referred to our push to build up trade and stability arrangements with all of our partners. I again emphasize our commitment to constructive diplomacy with Pakistan so that our entire region can build the trade machinery that will bring about peace and prosperity. We've also done our best to reform aid. By now, there can be no doubt that on-budget aid through our national programs, such as the Citizen Charter or our national health programs, is far more effective at bringing the scale and scope of development to large numbers of Afghans in ways that off-budget aid simply is not set up to achieve. We have already described our fiscal reform roadmap, and we continue to work closely with the IMF, the World Bank, and ADB to make sure that all on-budget aid will meet international standards for fiduciary control and end-use oversight. But we need to do more. Development assistance needs to work at scale. It needs to build systems, not projects. We need to be able to show the people in newly stabilized regions that our government can bring them sustainable, corruption-free jobs, justice and services, not one-off programs. This will be challenging, but we are no longer starting from scratch. Innovative donor programs such as EU's excellent state-building contract, the American government's new development partnership, and the ARTF's ongoing incentive program show that properly designed on-budget support programs can bring about the reforms and investment that are so badly needed. We would like to see more of your aid go through such programs that are every bit as much in your own national strategic interest as they are in ours. Our record of matching words with deeds should help convince your government and people, particularly the hard-hit taxpayers, that you have a partner in the government of national unity that shares your democratic values and is focused relentlessly on ensuring our shared interest in security. I thank each one of you in your countries for not only staying the course, but also expanding in your support in Warsaw and Brussels, and through bilateral and multilateral mechanisms. Together, we have created a platform for cooperation that can result in the replacement of a vicious circle of chain-linked problems with a virtuous circle of chain-linked solutions. Combined development across core functions of the market, society, and state is not merely desirable, it is feasible. As we are meeting in a changed context, let me urge all regional, international, and national stakeholders to take stock of the context and respond to it constructively. President Trump's imaginative South Asia strategy is providing a new context for reassessment to renounce violence and war and to embrace dialogue and cooperation. We welcome and strongly endorse the strategy and stress that its primary objective is to ensure security and stability in the region, thereby helping secure the world from the threat of terrorism. We learned to lead and manage under conditions of radical uncertainty, never losing our strategic focus or our strategic patience. As the First Lady stated yesterday, our people are now living and planning within a horizon in context of relative certainty. This is a great payoff of the new South Asia strategy, and we welcome it. Given the platform of transformation in the change context, let me conclude with some broader questions that must be considered. The question of legacy matters. First and foremost, our 2019 election must secure a consensus that the process has been fair and people's voices have been heard and acted upon. Second, democracy must be institutionalized. I have flagged the investments that we are making in building the foundations for a self-reliant Afghanistan. But as critical as economic growth, regional trade, and even domestic security may be, there is one reform whose importance trumps all of them. We must advance the rule of law. The Constitution is our statement of values and the national consensus for how disputes and disagreements get resolved without the use of arms and violence. Our Constitution defines our people's rights and obligations and obligates the state to advance and protect them. It is the bedrock on which all else stands. The stories that you hear in the discussion that you will have today are the means by which constitutional government in Afghanistan will continue to replace violence, patronage, and corruption. Our state cannot continue to be the private property of a small and corrupt elite that profiteers on the suffering of our people. As I was preparing for this speech, a friend visiting from overseas was marveling that you could draw a long arch from Kabul in any direction, and you would not find as much freedom of speech, as much freedom to criticize, or as much commitment to reform as what you see in Afghanistan today. Despite our challenges, we cannot and should not forget that we are indeed making progress. Third, we must secure peace. I call once again on Pakistan to intensify the state-to-state dialogue with us to secure regional peace and security. Providing sanctuary to malign non-state actors is conduct unbecoming responsible international stakeholders in the 21st century. The successful peace agreement with Hizb Islami should demonstrate to Taliban groups that we have the capacity and the political will to enter and successfully conclude an intra-Afghan dialogue. Opt for love instead of war, ballots instead of bullets, in dialogue instead of destruction. Afghanistan is undergoing a generational change. We are nurturing a whole new generation of young reformers, and we continue to break the patronage of the past with the practical realization of a government that is based on merit, law, and rules. If just one of my prayers can be answered, it is this: that the next government continues to build on this foundation that our Constitution provides to make sure that the next generation of children is hope, opportunity, and the chance to never again live in violence and corruption that has been a dark cloud over so many of our lives. We've had 5 generations that have been divided. We are now looking to a generation of healing, a generation of compassion, a generation of mercy, and a generation of peace. We've made tough choices. We've fought back against terror. We've tackled the roots of power and corruption. We've challenged the distortion to our religion and culture that blocked women from school and made justice arbitrary and predatory. We will leave the field scarred and bloodied, but determined to succeed. But we will leave behind hope, because imagination is vision, is returned to our country. The land of Rumi, known as Maulana to us, Amir Ali Sher Nawai, Khushal Khatak, and our other literary giants across centuries is once again producing first-class poetry in prose. 17 years ago, the language, it nearly died. From penny novels to epic poetry, from the transient to the enduring, from the existential to the civilizational, our women and men are hard at work to demonstrate that collective imagination is giving voice to our national hopes and aspirations to lead secure, meaningful, and prosperous lives. You have my very warmest best wishes and thanks for being such great partners and friends.